Hello, everybody. My name is Graham Owen, and you're watching the Political Vigilante, soon to be Bitcoin Vigilante. We're going to be, as we've started to kind of transition, more of a Bitcoin focused show. Still going to talk politics as it relates to Bitcoin, and that's what this segment is all about. We talked last week about how Trump and RFK both gave pro-Bitcoin speeches at the Bitcoin Nashville conference, and which was huge. And Bitcoin took a bump. It went up to 70,000 briefly, but in the last 72 hours, the price has come down. And this is on CoinDesk. And now the price currently is down near about 63,000. It looks, well, now it's up to 65,000. So it's Bitcoin plunges more than 10% since sitting 70K 72 hours ago. The slide is the odds of a Donald Trump victory in November might have bulls rethinking some bets. So what this article is claiming is that Bitcoin is lower than 5.5% over the last 24 hours. It talks into the coins. Markets received what nominally was good news on Thursday morning, with the U.S. July manufacturing falling far more than economist expectations, sending interest rates to multi-month lows across the board. Also, U.S. initial jobless claims jumped to their highest level in about 1 year. Taken together, the data adds to ideas that the U.S. is on the cusp of a monetary easing cycle by the Federal Reserve, usually thought of as a bullish for risk assets. Chairman Jerome Powell indicated that there might be a rate cut for September. That's always good for the markets. The Bank of England joined the monetary easing campaign, and so did the Bank of Canada and European Central. But one of the news, I think, why it's come down is Bitcoin pumped to 70,000 on Monday following the excitement of the Nashville conference, Bitcoin 2024, and the pledge of GOP nominee Donald Trump to be supportive of all things Bitcoin and even consider having the government hold crypto as this strategic asset. Now, we talked about this on the show. We'll get into it a little more with our guest, Rosie Tran. And I had a lot of questions about what Trump said, but just in general, a major presidential candidate, former president who's also a presidential candidate, saying publicly, I'm going to be in favor of Bitcoin. That's never happened before. So that's why it was like, wow, this sent the price up. But what this article is also talking about is that Trump's odds of winning have come down. So when Biden was still in the race and there was the assassination attempt, they had the assassination attempt, and then Trump, the RNC, the Republican National Convention, Trump's numbers went way up. And then he had a 70% chance of winning just 2 weeks ago. Now, since Harris has entered the race and Biden has stepped down, Trump's chances have faded to 55%. So that means, and I don't think Harris or the Democrats will be, I don't think they'll be good for Bitcoin and crypto. Not that I'm a Trump guy, obviously not a Trump guy, but, and I don't even know if he knows what he's talking about. But to discuss this further, I want to bring to the show, friend of the show, and also very knowledgeable person on Bitcoin and crypto herself, the Crypto Kitty, Rosie Tran. Welcome her. Rosie, how you doing?
Hey, I'm great. Oh, I forgot my kitty ears. I'm insecure now.
We know they're there. We trust that they're there, Rosie.
I don't have my Crypto Kitty ears. Oh my God, this is such an interesting topic, and I'm really excited that you're talking about it because it's really, really important. So first of all, the bump did come because, Trump was at the Bitcoin conference and talking positively about Bitcoin. But this is a huge win in general. The reason that Donald Trump and RFK and other people are talking about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general is because it can't be ignored anymore. It's definitely a large part of the constituency. People are really worried about inflation. I don't know if you've seen the prices. They're absolutely crazy. You go to the grocery store and my grocery bill is like $200 just to get basics. And so crypto assets are becoming really, really important, specifically Bitcoin, to help people hedge inflation. And so the fact that a major political party, whether it's, the Democrats or Republicans, are even talking about it, and there was some talk around the Bitcoin conference of Harris possibly speaking. There was talk about her being interested in it. And so the fact that the two major political parties are even talking about it, I think that's the news headline more so than the price, more so than the Bitcoin conference, even if they don't know what it is, even if Harris doesn't know what it is, even if Donald Trump has no idea what Bitcoin is, it doesn't matter. It's so important that they know that they need to talk about it. So that's actually the big headline.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I mean, the specifics that you listen to Trump's speech, it sounds like he doesn't know the difference between Bitcoin and crypto, whatever. To me, it just felt like his staff was like, hey,
You
a
need to
lot
talk
of
about this.
Republicans might vote for RFK. I think he was just trying to take votes away from RFK. But you're right. The bigger picture is a major, a huge candidate for president. He could be president. He was once before. He could win. You can debate the polls and all this stuff, and the polls are going to change 500 times between now and November. But it's huge. And not only that, like Harris was going to speak right after the Bitcoin conference. 27. I covered this on the show. 27 Democrats wrote a letter publicly saying we want to reverse Liz Warren's anti-crypto bill, because even people within the Democratic Party realize, like you say, look, Bitcoin and crypto are here to stay. We have to get on board with this. If we're seen as the old people's party that's like, Bitcoin's just for drug dealers, we're going to be out of touch, And I think there was a major politician that also spoke. I forget her name, but she also spoke in Nashville, and she talked about how she was talking about actual policy, and the fact that it's even being discussed, if there is a debate between Harris and Trump, and I don't know if there's going to happen. He sounds like he's avoiding it. She's really trying to egg him on. If they do have a debate, I'm pretty certain Bitcoin will be brought up, which just them talking about it on a national debate covered by the major networks is huge. You can't, like you say, you can't avoid Bitcoin anymore. You can't avoid crypto, especially since the beginning of the year, the ETFs. So these huge institutional companies, and we can talk, the ETFs, we all have our opinions on, I'm not a huge fan of the ETFs as a product, but in terms of, again, them pushing more money, institutional money in, and pushing adoption. Now people with regular investment portfolios who don't know what Bitcoin is are like, yeah, get me into this Bitcoin thing. And their investment person says, yeah, I got you into this Bitcoin ETF. And they go, great. And that's helped the number go up. That helped us reach an all-time high in April before the halving, which was huge. And we just tickled it again at 70. So yeah, I think this is significant. And what I feel like, this is significant. Regardless, we can go into the details of who said what, but you're right. Overall, this is a big thing. So let me ask you this, Rosie, as somebody that follows this closely, how do you see the Democrats wanting to reverse Warren's thing? Harris's staff is talking about Bitcoin. Whatever she said, I don't know what she said publicly, but at some point she's going to have to address it publicly at some point. And I don't know if she's going to be so dense to go, Bitcoin's bad. Trump like Bitcoin, me hate Bitcoin. If she's going to do that, that dumb thing that the two-party system does, or if she's going to have some sort of sensible understanding. November is not that far away, but it's also so many insane. In the last 2 weeks, we've had the craziest. We've had an assassination attempt on a candidate, the RNC, then we had the sitting president and Democratic nominee drop out. I mean, these are like, this stuff this isn't a regular election cycle.
This is not.
We have, as you pointed out, sorry, I just realized I got to plug my computer in. As you pointed out too, we are coming into big inflation, which is impacting every American. Like, this is the thing that the Democrats keep missing. They keep wanting to talk about identity politics. We could have a female president. Awesome. What's that going to do for my grocery bill? What's that going to do for the fact that my car insurance went from $240 a month to $317? What are you going to do about that? Making America great again doesn't fix that problem. First female black lady, that doesn't fix that problem. What are you going to do for my pocketbook, your pocketbook? Because we can't afford to live anymore. So how do you see all of this playing? And I know we're sort of getting into crystal ball territory.
But well, Bernie Sanders was talking about I remember when Bernie was running and he was saying the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. That was his log line. And a lot of people don't understand, well, what does that mean? How do the rich get richer? How do the poor get poorer? And it's this price inflation, because it inflates asset prices and makes rich people richer. And then the average person who can't afford to invest in assets, they get more and more poor because the dollar gets devalued. And so that's why Bitcoin is really, really important to the average person. And again, people see 70,000 and they get really worried and they get really scared, but you can buy a 0.00001% of a Bitcoin. So that's not an issue. As far as crystal balling, obviously I can't see the future, but I think that what's really, really dangerous is making Bitcoin political, because it is not gold is not political. Nobody says I'm pro gold or anti gold or this and that. And this is basically digital gold. It's an asset. It's a digital asset that's decentralized. And making it political is the most dangerous thing that can happen, because as you said, someone can say, you like Bitcoin, me anti-Bitcoin, without really understanding what it is. And I think at first, when Elizabeth Warren was so anti-Bitcoin, I thought that's what was happening. But then I started doing my research, and unfortunately, she is backed by some of the largest Wall Street banks and things like that.
Oh, that's shocking. I'm shocked.
Which was very disheartening, because I was a huge Liz Warren fan for a long time. And so I was very, very sad about that. But especially because she was very anti-stablecoin, which is something that is super helpful to low-income people for transactions and things like that. And she knows a lot about credit in general, because she was anti-predatory lending and caching and things like that. And Bitcoin and stablecoins are the solution to predatory lending and predatory fees for low income people and middle income people. So that's when I realized that she was bought and sold. And it was very disheartening to me, because I really was a huge Liz Warren fan for a long time. So I think that making Bitcoin political is very, very dangerous, not just for education of Bitcoin, but also for the candidates themselves, because Bitcoin is a monetary system that is blood free. We're in 2 proxy wars right now, unfortunately, and that is taxpayer blood money that is being used to kill innocent people. Whatever your viewpoint on, if you're pro-Ukraine, pro-Russia, pro-Palestine, pro-Israel, it doesn't matter. People are being killed, and mostly innocent people. And your tax dollars
profiting from it.
And people are profiting, and they're using our tax dollars. So when I go to, the grocery store, Kroger or wherever, and, I pay taxes on my groceries, 9% or whatever, that goes towards the war machine. When I pay my taxes out of my paycheck, or anytime I get a gig, or even if I do a comedy show and I'm getting my, 1099 for my $100 or whatever, that amount that I pay at the end of the year to the IRS when I file my tax return as an independent contractor goes towards the war machine. And so it's very, very important that people understand that Bitcoin is anti-war. It's a current digital currency owned by the people. It's run by the decentralized miners. Everyone who's mining is securing the network, whereas the physical USD network is being secured by guns and blood. And people really do not understand that. And that's what's so important about Bitcoin, is that people do not understand, because they go, well, it's scam money, or it's unsafe, or it's internet money. But the US dollar is secured by a network, and that network is the US military. So, which I support the troops. I perform for the troops many times at 3 or 4 tours I've done, but I don't support war. I support, people that volunteer their lives to their country. And I support, humanitarian work, but I don't support going overseas and killing babies to secure the USD. And that's really what that is happening. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think that there's other geopolitical things happening, and there are, but when you are securing, America as big brother world protector, it's to secure the US dollar. I mean, it's a totally cliche line, Graham, but what do they say? They say, you want to know what happens in politics, follow the money. And the money is to protect the USD at all costs. We're worried about China taking over global reserve currency. We're worried about Bitcoin taking over global reserve currency, and the bankers their knees are shaking. And so I think that I'm always bullish. I think it's going to go up. It's just a matter of time. I think because it's capped at 21 million coins, but because the news, it's very sensitive to the news cycle. that is what's causing that. I think people got really excited when they saw, Trump and RFK talking at Bitcoin Nashville, and so it gave it a big bump. And then, always people that are newbies in the Bitcoin cycle are like, oh, my Bitcoin went up, I'm going to sell some. Because any old timers like us know to HODL.
Yeah, hodl for sure. And I think you're right. I mean, like, somebody has whatever, a little bit of Bitcoin that they bought it 58 or 60,000, it jumps to 60 and they go, ooh, profit. And I get that. I understand, like,
I've done that too. I've made that mistake.
Yeah, you need to take short-term profits, or maybe your financial situation is such, you're like, oh, this big bill came in or whatever. Like we're talking about, like my grocery bill's big, whatever. I got to get my brakes done, and that's going to be $600. Well, I got $600 in profit from my Bitcoin, so I'm going to cash out and pay that. I totally get that. But again, folks like you and I are just like hodl.
Nope. Hodl for dear life. But yes, I think a lot of people that are either unsophisticated investors who maybe got in the 60,000s, or people that, like you said, just need to pay the bills, and they're like, you know what, I've had this Bitcoin for a little bit, it's gone up. My car broke down, my transmission, it's up to 70,000. I'm just going to sell and get out. And so that is the push and pull of Bitcoin, because it is such a volatile asset. It's still not stable 100%. But I do see a lot of stability in the next 2 years, because as you see, and I think we talked about this in another episode of Political Vigilante, is that there is going to be a time when these giant swings are not going to happen anymore, because there's so many people invested in Bitcoin and it's so mainstream and there's so much mainstream adoption that it's going to take a whale purchase or selling to really move the market that big. But the longer that, the more coins that are mined and available out there, and the more, people that are holding and the more people that are mining, the more stable it becomes. So it's like a spider web that has more and more layers and layers and layers and layers. Whereas in the beginning, it was so weak.
Well, yeah. And to remind people, oh my God, it went to 70 and it pulled back to 63, where it's already back up to 65. Let us remind people, a year ago, it was at 34,000. 18 months ago, it was at 20,000. I mean, so this is why, like, people who've been in several cycles like you and I, the longer you're in it, the more you go, oh, hang on, hold on to it. Like, hold on to it.
Baby, I was in Bitcoin when it went to $200. And if I would have had the foresight, because I wasn't that into it at the time, I was just kind of watching it and playing with it. It was when it went from like 5,000 or 1,000 to 200. And I would have sold everything I had to get in at 200, but I wasn't thinking like that back then. It was still so new. It was still internet money. It was still quote unquote drug money. And it was just something that I was interested in, but it wasn't something that I was so passionate like I am now. And obviously hindsight is 2020, but all of the naysayers and haters that have said Bitcoin's going to crash, you're going to go to zero, this and that, I think they have been proven wrong more than enough times. And not just that, it's actually physically impossible to go to zero, because the entire network would have to crash all over the world. All the miners would have to crash and everyone would have to sell out of their Bitcoin. And there's just too many diehards for that to happen. So I don't see that happening anytime soon. This isn't a GameStop. This isn't a bet on a stock. This is I hate to sound so corny, but it's a digital revolution. It's a financial revolution. And it's a way to get out of the traditional monetary system, and not necessarily discard the traditional monetary system, but it's when we see countries in South America using it as global reserve, when we see other countries, when we see it being banned in China 10 times and coming back every single time, it starts to, make people think.
Yeah, China is already like, we're going to probably go full Bitcoin. They're already like hinting that they're going to go full, after trying to ban it.
It's like literally 10 times, 10 times.
Like it's the adage of Bitcoin. I will repeat till the day I die, which is you can't change Bitcoin. Bitcoin changes you. And you can try, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But look, if America doesn't full on collapse, some president somewhere is going to wise up and have a smart staff and go, we need to, like what Trump was suggesting, and I don't think he understood it, but an American president going, first of all, the United States owns a lot of Bitcoin because it seized a lot of it.
I was going to say that we're one of the largest holders of Bitcoin because of all the seizures that we did on Silk Road and other things like that. And they haven't auctioned all of it off yet. So
we have something like 150 to 170,000 full Bitcoins that the United States owns. That is a huge amount. And Trump was saying, I want to have a 4 million coin reserve or whatever. And so if the United States started buying coins and holding it, then we would transition from the United States dollar being the world's reserve currency to Bitcoin being the world's reserve currency. And the United States would be in a position financially. I wonder what the Federal Reserve and the central banks would do if the United States, which is basically, we're just a bank and an oil company with a military, is basically what we are.
It's sad, but it is also hilarious, but it's also very sad. So I'm laughing, but I'm not laughing to make light of such a terrible situation. I'm laughing because it's so absurd, and it sounds like we're in the Matrix or something. But you're absolutely right.
And I don't know. I don't know if it feels like America is just going to be the last to adopt Bitcoin like this, but because they already own so much of it, and because there are politicians now on both sides of the aisle starting to go, hey, this is important. And because, look, Democrat pollsters, whether they think Bitcoin is the dumbest thing ever, they saw the bump that Trump got after Nashville. They saw it. Whatever you want to say, what he thinks about it, if he gets it or not, there was a clear bump after his speech in Nashville, and they went, wow, that means something. So whichever politician or whichever party is smart about it is going to be the winner. Now, I don't mean necessarily this election, but in terms of like
long-term. Yeah.
Long-term.
Well, this is the best case scenario, actually. And I don't like to pit USD against Bitcoin. And I think that's what the big Fed bankers are kind of shaking in their knees about. We can have the US dollar as the global reserve currency backed by Bitcoin. I mean, we had a global reserve currency backed by gold for 100 years before, we got screwed in the 70s, bend over and take it. And so that would actually, I think that there's a middle ground solution here that keeps America very, very strong and safe. And what people don't understand is we can get out of all these wars. We don't have to be in a constant state of war. I'm trying to think if in my adult lifetime I've been without a war, and I don't think I can think that off the top of my head. The Afghanistan war was 14 years, longest war in U.S. history. 20, excuse me. And I don't think that in my adult lifetime, I've been without a war. And that's very sad that it's so desensitized. In the 70s, when my parents were in a war in Vietnam and trying to escape, that was big. There was protests. It was a big deal. It was a big part of American history, that war era. And that was only 7 years. And now it's just like there's so much war. People are like war fatigued. People are like protest fatigued because it's just constant. There are children that are alive that have never lived without a war. And so if we're not trying to protect this network, if we're not trying to make these global oil allegiances and all sorts of things, because the USD is backed by Bitcoin, that actually we can put, I don't think we're going to do it, but we can actually put all that war money into healthcare, into other things that help the people, into the roads, things like that we're supposed to be spending tax money on. Again, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's very optimistic, but I mean, imagine, what is the military budget? Like $1 trillion or something like that? It's
and
like
every year it gets voted. Since 2001, since 9/11, regardless of who Republican, Democrat control the White House, Congress, or the Senate, regardless, every year, bipartisan support for a war budget increase. For 22 years, this has happened.
And that money could go easily into the healthcare system or other, certain debt forgivenesses or predatory debt forgiveness and things like that. And that money instead goes to bomb children and pay for other things. But not just that, I performed for the troops multiple times, and I spoke to many, many U.S. Soldiers who said because of the overblown budget, what happens is they have to spend so they can keep asking for more and more money. And so there's a lot of government waste. There's a lot of money that is spent on $50 a cheeseburger for the troops because they have to buy American beef over here and then ship it over there because they have to make sure they're spending on American, contractors and things like that. And so there's all sorts of really bizarre unintended consequences of this war machine where people are getting paid, and they're not necessarily, people talk about, rich contractors getting paid off of the American dollar. They're not necessarily American contractors sometimes. They also then hire these like translators overseas and it's just such a system. There's so many things that need to be propped up to continue this $1 trillion budget. And, meanwhile, 80% of Americans don't have healthcare. So I think those things are, 80% of Americans don't have sufficient healthcare. A lot of people have healthcare, but it's not enough. And if you are injured, you're screwed. My dad passed away and we got his medical bill for all of his healthcare when he died, and it was like $1 million. Most of it was covered by Medicaid, but if we didn't what would we do? I don't have $1 million, lying around, and it's my dad, so it's just a crazy, crazy situation. So I think it's just really the implications of switching to Bitcoin as backing the USD is so important and so significant. And I actually think it's very important to keep it, like I said, apolitical, so people on both sides of the aisle can learn about it. But I don't know what's going to happen with it. But I definitely think price-wise, which was your original question before I went off on a tangent, I think that Bitcoin is going to just slow and steady, as it always has since the beginning of its creation. Literally, you look at the chart and there's a lot of up and down, but if you zoom out on the chart, it's just straight up.
Yeah. I just say it just does this. If you just look at the chart, it just does that. And it just keeps going up. And, you bring up a good point about, your family history. I mean, your family were refugees of a war that America, got involved with, right? I mean, they had to leave Vietnam to come to this country. And that's what America is doing, just creating refugees all over the world. And it's brutal when we could be fixing and saving the world. I mean, this is like,
we definitely have the money to fix and save the world. We definitely have the money to help people. And regarding, the war in Vietnam, even though that's been so long, 40, 50 years ago, it wasn't just the destruction. It was then come back in with American contractors and rebuild. And then that's another system of corruption and money laundering. And so, hey, the Ukraine is decimated. They need help. And they, who's going to come rescue them? American contractors and construction and security. And then that budget keeps ballooning and ballooning. It's a really corrupt system that feeds itself, and it just has to stop, because there's people that live down my block that need more help. And also, we're creating the problem, literally creating the problem to fix it, which is going out and bombing innocent people to then help them when there's innocent people here that, and also let's stop bombing people. Let's stop killing people. It's unethical.
I mean, just in mind, again, you just look at it on a local level in my neighborhood. About 4 months ago, there was this whole homeless encampment under one of the overpasses, the 405 freeway, and the city came in and moved everybody out of there. I don't know where people went, and they cleaned it up. It's back. It's completely back. And there's just garbage and people living in third world conditions, like blocks from where I live. I mean, literally a half a mile from where I'm sitting, there's people in just human misery in the richest country in the world. And again, I just can't watch that anymore and be like, we're sending money overseas to do all this bombing and destroy people's lives, and children are dying. And then that's causing intergenerational trauma and PTSD from the soldiers, or on down the line. And we can't fix right here. We can't fix this right here. Like, and don't tell me we don't have money. Don't tell me we don't have money for this. And it's just so, not to mention why the schools are being cut. So, we just go down the line, and then now we get to you and our grocery bill, and just the cost of housing, which has been deliberately inflated by these companies that have bought up all of the single family homes. And this one company, Amherst or whatever, I was just watching, they have 1,500 homes that they just in Charlotte, they just own 1,500 homes, and they're gouged. I mean, that's a whole nother issue, but, so yeah, we can really fix these problems. And I hope ultimately Bitcoin, can be this. I believe Bitcoin can be the savior.
It sounds a little like delusional for people who don't know anything about Bitcoin. They're like, okay, you guys are just like crypto bros or whatever. Just like, oh, Bitcoin can save the world. But actually it can. Like, that's what's so frustrating. It's like, it actually can, because of what it represents. It represents getting away from the traditional banking system. I don't think people realize the problem is our public school system on purpose keeps people uneducated about money. And so nobody, there's like that famous Henry Ford quote that says if people knew how the money system worked, they'd be out in the streets rioting. And it's the bankers don't want you to know. And it's not some like crazy global conspiracy. You can go on the Fed website, and a lot of the stuff is on there. You can go and like look up basic finance stuff. This is stuff that's taught in economics. But the average person doesn't know it because they're taught to, be uneducated about finance. Don't you think it's really bizarre that financial education isn't taught in schools?
Yeah.
It's like financial education and psychology and like personal development, emotional, like things like that, things that like actually matter, are not taught in schools, but all this like weird stuff that's like outdated and like, history books from the 1950s and all sorts of things. And it's done purposefully. And it's not necessarily a conspiracy. It's just a leftover system that's never been fixed, and it benefits certain people, and certain people make a lot of money from it. And so it sounds, like I said, a little delusional to be like Bitcoin can save the world, but it actually can.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I know you got a show tonight, Rosie, so I appreciate you taking time. Where can everybody follow you online, watch your podcast, all that stuff?
I'm on all platforms at Funny Rosie, and then on Instagram, I'm Out of the Box Rosie, because somebody took Funny Rosie, but they're not using it. So check me out. And Out of the Box Rosie is based on my podcast, Out of the Box Podcast with Rosie Tran. And on my Instagram, I have a link tree to all my podcasts, and I have a couple podcasts, including my Hello Crypto Kitty podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rosie, for joining us today. Really great to see you as always.
Thanks,
and we'll
Bye,
see you soon. Thank
Bye,
you.
Bitcoin.
Bye, Bitcoin. Yeah, hodl.